I'm Roger Hanlon from the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. I'm a senior scientist and I do a lot of field work. My lab studies in particular cephalopods, that's octopus, squid, and cuttlefish. And we do a lot of field research, diving. We also do a lot of laboratory experimentation. Today I want to introduce you to the wily octopus, an animal that we're concentrating on at the moment with our research grants. And in particular, we want to learn a little bit about how the 8 arms are controlled by this unusual animal, whether its brain is controlling them or their independent control of each individual arm, with a view towards eventually soft robotics. There might be capability of using the octopus as an animal model to produce a soft, flexible arm used in industry and society and defense. So first I want to introduce you to the animals underwater, so let's go do a little bit of diving. Here we are hitting the drink in Indonesia, and you can see the beautiful coral reef. The divers look at the camera equipment searching for animals. It's very equipment intensive, a lot of sophisticated diving and camera gear. And it takes a lot of coordination among the divers to find the animals and get these data. Well, you can see that it takes a lot of gear to study animal behavior underwater, but most importantly, perhaps, it takes a lot of patience and knowledge of the animal, how it lives under natural conditions, and after it habituates to our presence, we get a lot of beautiful natural behavior. So let's take a look at some of the very specific uses of these 8 arms, and remember there are 200 suckers on every arm. So we're looking at the function of both of these. This is Octopus rubescens from California, aptly named for its red coloration, but look at those arms. They're all doing slightly different things. They're using some for locomotion. They're holding the first pair and a curl, and all 8 arms are really beautifully coordinated. Now they decide to swim backwards, the octopus does, and they're using the 8 arms as a single keel for the swimming. Great adaptation. This is the Atlantic longarm octopus, and it's got a small body and these long, skinny arms, but the dexterity is really amazing. It's searching for food, and you can see that it's stretching its arms out in every direction, and then it goes into locomotion, so the arms are showing at least 2 functions right now as it moves along searching for tiny little clams and crabs. And here's the same animal, and notice how all 8 arms are stretched out in radial directions. The eyes can't possibly coordinate all of this. So this gives us a hint that there's some independence to each arm and what it can sense and what it can do. And now the animal just slithers away to a new feeding spot. Well, now we travel across the Pacific Ocean to Tahiti, and we're on a very shallow coral reef. This is Octopus cyanea, and this is our rocky scene. This octopus is sitting there throwing punches with different arms at these very aggressive damselfishes and sergeant majors, all of which are territorial, and they want the octopus to move, so they keep zipping in and nipping at it. Well, let's bring it back to the laboratory where we can do some real experiments on somewhat controlled conditions and ask some specific questions. But first I want to show you our young and our older octopus bimaculoides that we've shipped in from California. These are beautiful small animals. We have this great seawater system in the Marine Resources Center, and we exploit that for this kind of work. And now I want to introduce you to the actual animals, and we'll take a quick look and walk around in our laboratory. This is the Marine Resources Center where we do a lot of the culture and experimentation. And you can see here we have relatively new, the cephalopod initiative. And we are looking at several species included here, but in particular today we're going to talk about Octopus bimaculoides. This is one of our culture and experimental labs right here. As we walk gingerly over here, we have 2 tanks down in front of you, each with an octopus, and you can see the octopus over in this tank right here. This is the 2-spot octopus. You can see that iridescent spot. And when you come near the tank, the animals really get active and start moving around. Here is a small octopus hatchling straight out of the egg. You can see the spot there under the eye, and look how coordinated the arms are. Here's a different little hatchling, miniature adult, no larval stage, and walking in a very coordinated fashion backwards.
All right, let's get serious and do a little experimentation. How flexible is that octopus arm? And how do you determine that? So let's really have a go at it and see what we've come up with so far.
Here we've trained the octopus to reach just through one of those small holes so that only one arm can get through, so we can see how they can grab and sense things and find out all the details of how that sucker and arm coordination occurs. And here is another case where the octopus reaches out for this white object, has to find the hole, so the sort of eye-hand coordination, so to speak, is not very good. And finally, when one of the suckers finds the hole, the arm responds very, very well and very quickly in a coordinated fashion. And you see a second arm tries to help on the right, and now the octopus comes out and tries to grab with other arms, but of course we have the plexiglass sheet there. So the idea is that we can see what one individual arm does very well. So this is a really good example of the many deformations, the different shapes that the arms can do. They can bend and twist in every direction, and they're extremely strong. You can see them pulling on the object there. Here's another case. This is a dual vision, and the arm is reaching out, trying to get the object. So again, their vision isn't very good to guiding it, but once the arm gets there, it really acts very swiftly and very coordinated. Now it managed to get a second arm through to grab the object. So the arms are quite independent from any of the things they do, and once they grab something, even if the octopus can't see it, they really work it over, and they're tasting it and touching it and trying to figure out what it is and whether or not to eat it. Here's another example of the octopus reaching for a white object, and look at the tips of the arms. They're so delicate. They have tiny little suckers, and look at the dexterity of wrapping around, grabbing in different ways. Now it uses a different arm and a second arm and a third arm, and it's really totally wrapping this object up, trying to pull it through that small hole. Well, here's an example of some of the data we get. How flexible is that arm? Well, we, in 120 minutes of video, found and observed 16,500 arm deformations. That means the animal is either bending, twisting, elongating, or shortening. And much to our amazement, we found that all 8 arms can do all of these deformations along their lengths and in all directions. This truly is one of the most flexible appendages on planet Earth. This is an elegant cross-section of an arm and sucker, and it's just packed full of powerful muscles.
Well, aside from locomotion, I like to describe the octopus arm as a device that delivers the suckers somewhere to do some work. This is the sense organ extraordinaire. It is essentially sort of like your finger, your nose, and your tongue all wrapped into one in terms of what those suckers can do. So let's take a look at those in a little more detail.
Here we get a really clear view of the suckers looking through the glass. And you notice that some are larger than others, and they can grab the glass and they can scoot along in a very subtle manner. As we close up, look really carefully, you see the one on the right is really truly sucked on. Others are not sucked on yet. They create a sealed rim around the outside and pull in. Extremely strong. And in this shot underwater, you see the octopus moving along and going camouflage and using the suckers to hold on to look like a rock. Now we have the really close-ups of the suckers, and look how they act like lips, where they can just come down and fold onto an object right there like a thin thread or a piece of metal. And it's really shown very well right here, where they just clamp in. We didn't know they could actually move in that kind of fashion. We thought they were always doing things like they were round and squishing down. And there it is, really close up, showing it like large lips. And they only do that when there's a long linear object to grab. So there's a lot of versatility in these suckers. Here is a close-up of an electron micrograph of a sucker, and you can see that it's very complicated. There are a lot of little sensing cilia inside here, and so it's a complicated organ that is good for grasping, but it's a sense organ for the taste and touch and smell. So we don't know how that's innervated and how it works yet. And here's a close-up of a sucker, a couple suckers again, and you can see this is confocal microscopy in living tissue, where we give some false color to see the details of nerves and muscles throughout the arm, including one of the what we call an axial nerve cord. There's a lot of information in this sort of thing, and there's a close-up going down through the tissue, going deeper and deeper at the base of the sucker, and all of the different cells and cell bodies are all colored differently so that we can reconstruct this in 3D later on. Now this is a diagram of an octopus illustrating that most of its neurons are outside of the brain. The brain has 80 million, but in the periphery, the nervous system has 300 million neurons. And those 8 arms are using most of those neurons for control of each arm and each sucker. And so we've got a large nervous system outside of the brain. That's very unusual. And how to coordinate all 8 arms, the big question, of course, is how much does the central brain control, and how independent are the individual arms, and how well does one arm coordinate with the arm next to it?
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little journey into the ocean to look at the wily octopus. And by the way, I sort of gleaned over the idea that this really is a very smart animal. It's got an extraordinary brain and all of these arms, and this combination of these miniature satellite brains revolving around a central brain, and that coordination is really quite an unusual way to, let's say, design an animal with a bunch of arms for locomotion, all kinds of sense organs. So we're having a lot of fun studying these animals. I hope you found it interesting. Feel free to take a look at the MBL webpage at any time to get a little more information. Take care. Bye.